What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim, and I'm excited to bring you the state of the Rutgers Scarlet Knights with Larry from the Night Watch podcast. But before I introduce him, make sure to like, follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. It's been a real fun journey to see our channel on YouTube really begin to get bigger. And so if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. Any comments or any emails, messaging, follow us on X, email us at big10footballtalk@gmail.com. But without further ado, Larry, how you doing?
Zach, what's going on? It's an absolute pleasure to be joining you in the middle of the dog days of summer, getting ready for the football season. I'm busy, but I'm doing good, my brother. And Rutgers is kind of having some energy, so I'm doing well. I'm happy.
Rutgers, I feel like, has been setting off fireworks like since Memorial Day from now, and we'll get into that, particularly in the recruiting realm. But before we get there, you've been on the show before.
Yes.
But one thing I've been asking as I've been doing this series of getting to the state of each program, I have been very intrigued by each podcaster's story and how they got into covering the team that they cover. And so, Larry, I'd love to just let the listeners hear how you got involved in being a podcaster for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights.
So I had a background in audio. I'd done music for a while in my 20s and whatnot. And I'm an NFL podcaster for a specific team too. So I had the equipment here. And how Rutgers came about was a few years ago, there was an open call. I'm an avid, poster subscriber to the Rivals exclusive board for Rutgers Sports. I'd been following recruiting, obviously a season ticket holder. I'm an alumni of the school, both undergrad and law school. So there was an open call on one of the forums for Rutgers for a website called On the Banks. I believe that's SB Nation's, subsidiary.
Yeah, I think so.
It was Aaron Brightman, who's a great podcaster in his own right for Rutgers. He was running the site at the time, and it was an open call. We need interested writers to write content. You have to send a resume. You have to send a writing sample. I had dabbled in writing, most of my life, creative writing, and professionally here and there for this local periodical in Newark, the Newarker. So I submitted a writing sample, a resume, and I was welcomed by Aaron to On the Banks to be kind of a writer. And I wrote not a regular column, but big picture type articles about Rutgers sports. So I'm sitting there, and as this podcast, space started really taking off, and I found that a lot of people in our age group are kind of really pioneering this new space, especially on the podcast mediums and on YouTube. I had been doing professional sports podcasting already, and I also had a current events podcast, and I noticed that Rutgers only really had a few very in their infancy, podcasts and content creators. And I recognized that there were a ton of Rutgers fans because my written content would get a lot of reads every time I put something out. And I was always hunting for Rutgers content, driving to work wherever during the season, especially to listen to. Sports radio in New York touches on Rutgers, but it doesn't delve into it as much as I'd like. So I knew there was kind of a need there. And as certain just a few channels, even to this day, are blossoming, I figured I'd throw my hat in the ring, and I figured there would be a decent market share there and interested ears. Turns out there are. Met you guys, linked up with the College Huddle, linked up with you, and it's really just taken off from there. So that's kind of how I got into it, specifically with respect to Rutgers.
Yeah, and I think if you guys haven't checked out Night Watch, Larry, I think you do a phenomenal job. It's hard to have a show where you're a one-man show and you do it very well. And you have been a real joy to add into the College Huddle network. And, the episode that we did back, was it middle of December, where we both said Rutgers is going to kick Miami's butt, which was great.
Yes. We predicted it, and the way they were going to do it, Zach, we were on the ball like 100%.
Yeah. But you have a great show. And so, guys, if you are not following Larry on YouTube, it's particularly YouTube where you're at, right?
Yes, it's YouTube. And I've gone into the podcast space a little bit, but YouTube's where my bread and butter is. So that's where you're going to find all my content. Night Watch, spelled like a Scarlet Knight. on YouTube, but please follow me. I really appreciate the kind words, Zach. I mean, it's a solo show, but I put thought and effort into it, and I can kind of carry the conversation for as long as it has to go on there by myself, and click at any time. It's not usually live, but I'll do some live content in the upcoming season. But there's all kinds of stuff live from games, like tailgate videos, and then analysis and discussion about the teams, specifically football and basketball. So I'd love to have anybody who's interested join the channel and subscribe. It helps a lot.
Yeah, and you are pretty you do a lot of podcasts after the fact, right? Like it's a lot of react videos.
Yes, it's a lot of react videos. So you're going to get recaps of, games and events or news that comes up, but you'll get, early in the season, like last year, I did a whole prediction video of game by game Rutgers football schedule, and I was 100% accurate. Now, it's not the best feat in the world because it's not that hard to predict that schedule, but I was 100% accurate in terms of wins and losses. So I will do, and I'll do it this year, like recap of the recruiting cycle, the season outlook. I do it for football and basketball. And then there's I made a little video of a tailgate in the rain, like my favorite food spot, just cool Rutgers content all around on there, but a lot of reaction, analysis, and discussion.
Very cool. Very cool. Dev follow Night Watch. We're going to talk a little bit about some of those things you just touched on as well, but let's get right into it.
Mm-hmm.
Rutgers, I think it stunned me at least. And I think part of it is because I was enamored with Gavin Wimsatt's athleticism. But Athan Kaliakmanis transferred in from Minnesota. We kind of assumed there'd be a quarterback battle. It is not a battle anymore. Kaliakmanis is the starter. Wimsatt has transferred out. Is this good or bad for Rutgers, and why?
So I think this is an interesting question, and I think I got to give some context to it. If you had asked me at the beginning of the competition, so to speak, when the end of last season, when Athan says he's going to transfer, I would tell you that I was rooting for Gavin Wimsatt because of his potential, what you just said, kind of really said it perfectly, enamored with his potential and his athleticism. Last year, a lot of our points, a lot of the reason for our offense kind of keeping certain defenses on their heels was because we had a mobile quarterback who could really do damage with his legs. I liked his pocket presence. And above all, he was a young guy who came to Rutgers really when he should have been in high school still, got here, got an NIL deal, and we were very excited about him. And everything I had seen from him and his development had really given me the impression that there was a high ceiling there. Okay. And if you had asked me a couple months ago, would it be a good thing if he's gone after spring ball? I would have said, no, I'm rooting for him. However, my answer to your question is that it's a great thing for Rutgers. Not that Wimsatt's gone, but the fact that Athan came in and there was a competition in spring that was so decisive that Athan was that much more impressive and fit the system and what Rutgers wants to do this year and what Kirk Ciarrocca wants to accomplish, that it wasn't even a question at all going into the summer. That tells me that Rutgers is well positioned and confident in their current starter. And here's the thing. Last year, as much as I liked Gavin and I thought he took a step forward last year, I thought he'd take a step forward again this year, and I was looking forward to that. The fact was that I think Rutgers at the skill positions from a schematic standpoint was actually better than I anticipated in the sense that guys were getting open. Opportunities were there downfield. Opportunities were there for yards after the catch with certain receivers. And we left a lot of that on the field or off the field because Gavin couldn't complete certain passes at a consistent level. Now, he's got a great arm. Some passes I was blown away by, but then the next drive, he'd miss a screen. And so when we went into the spring game, and I know you're not supposed to glean too much from the spring game, but it was interesting because the first pass Gavin throws is a out screen pass to a wide receiver that could be our bread and butter. It could be 5-6 yards a clip easily, and he misses. And okay, it's one pass. But Athan comes in and his first pass is like a deep ball. It got called back for a penalty, but it's a completion downfield. And you could just tell. Athan, I'm telling you right now, it doesn't look like the wheels are the same as Gavin with his legs. However, it looks like it's head and shoulders a difference with throwing the ball. And if he's going to execute on the field and get the ball to open playmakers, that's what we need. I will say, Schiano said after, like a couple weeks after Gavin transferred out, that it really wasn't that close. So, and I'm not saying that in terms of negative on Gavin, that Gavin was so, not performing well enough that it was not close because Gavin wasn't doing well. From what I've heard from camp reports, Gavin took another step forward, albeit incrementally, but Athan still was much better at throwing the ball and getting the ball where it needed to go. So I think this is a product of the team being confident, certain about the fact that they've upgraded the position, and giving a young man who gave so much to Rutgers for those 3 years the chance to go out and find a better place for himself instead of dragging him through summer. It would be great to have Gavin as a backup, but I understand why they did it. It encourages me that they're so confident at that position that we've upgraded it. If you upgrade that position compared to what we did last year, I think it bodes well for this year. I will also say, again, you're not supposed to glean too much from the spring game. I'm a tad bit bullish on a Johnny Shepard. And I know we have the freshman and, there's a lot of good things going on about him, but a Johnny Shepard, I'm interested to see what he can do, and he's probably going to be the backup. So I think overall, Zach, I think it bodes well for us, even though I might not have said that a few months ago because I love Gavin. But
yeah, well, and it really does speak to the reality that sometimes you just have a player and a coach that really mesh well. I think you and Kurt from Sky U Pod, we were on the college huddle together, and I thought Kurt made a really good point that there's this reuniting of Kurt Soraka and Athan Kaliakmanis from their days at Minnesota. And I think that really does help him. So the people who may have seen Kaliakmanis, and I'm one of them, I criticized Kaliakmanis a lot last year. But before the season last year, I really thought Kaliakmanis was going to take a step. And it seems like maybe what he was missing was his coach who had moved on to Rutgers. And now he's got him back. And it sounds like that really has kind of propelled him forward. Whereas Wimsatt, he was still growing, but he just wasn't growing fast enough for what Rutgers needs.
And I think that goes a long way. And like, to my point about last season, I don't know what's going on internally, but I sure as heck didn't think that we would be at the level we really appeared to be playing last year. So I think it was more, we're going to grow with Gavin, but they realized we've got to change course a little bit because the team around Gavin has grown leaps and bounds, and we're actually more ready to compete than we realize. We need that piece in there.
Yeah.
The Minnesota guys in general on that night and just different talk from different Minnesota fans, it really made me encouraged about Athan when I hadn't been initially because of his last season there. They seemed to be saying what we gleaned, like, hey, he with the right OC, he had a lot of potential. We kind of like him, and hearing that encouraged me. And then seeing how the competition went, I'm excited to see him.
Yeah. And just, I think for context about how the rest of the team has gotten better, and we'll talk about this more, Nebraska insider guy who's been on our show, Justin Adams, he was very adamant. He thinks Nebraska's first loss is Rutgers at Nebraska.
Wow.
So, I mean, Phil Steele's got Rutgers 8th out of 18 teams.
Mm-hmm.
I think people have a perception that Rutgers is kind of the also-ran that had a nice season last year.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the case, which I think leads to, what everybody has been talking about, which is the fireworks around recruiting. It's been absurd, and it's not just the number of recruits. I think they have 28, 29 guys now, but they have 6 or 7 4-star guys, which is the most, I think, ever in the modern era. Speak to that a bit. Like, what do you attribute this recruiting boom to?
I have to be honest. I'm still waiting kind of on all we hear from the guys who are really plugged into the program is that, guys are just excited, and the official visits went so well that a bunch of guys, signed up the weekend of a big official visit, and it kind of created a domino effect where guys just kept hopping on board. But we recently flipped a player from Penn State, and I understand his coach went to Duke, his primary recruiter. And so that helped in the process. And I'm trying to remember the exact, I think it was, I'll get the name of the recruit. There's so many recruits, it's hard to follow.
Right. But, which one is it? Oh, there's 30 of them that we have to keep track of.
But I don't know if there's any one thing. What I will say is And it's DJ McClary, 4-star linebacker, Jersey native. He was committed to Penn State. His primary recruiter had gone down. I think he took the head coaching job at Duke. Duke had kind of kicked the tires a little bit. There wasn't much interest there. That wasn't like it was a complete coup because Rutgers was on him, had been on him. He was interested in Rutgers. Penn State had just edged them out until his primary recruiter left, and then that changed things. But I think, I don't know exactly. I think certain classes have dynamics where they are more excited to go to a certain school, or the momentum is following them with certain kids they have relationships with and where they go. But I do think that if you're anywhere inside the program at Rutgers or anywhere close to the program, and these recruits and their handlers and their high school coaches, they know, what they're looking at, and they know the trajectory of programs. And the fact is that if you follow Rutgers, you understand that last year was not just a feel-good story. Last year was what I think is the beginning of turning the corner, because there are players who have been in the system for some time that we knew had raw talent, or we knew what the coaches thought of them. And they have started to really come into their own. And as they're coming into their own, and you see the pieces that are coming back, getting even more matured, and you see some of the pieces they brought in, or some of the guys who didn't get to play last year for whatever reason, who are going to be playing this year, there is an upward trajectory, and there's a lot of positive, outlook with Rutgers football. And Coach Schiano has always been a good recruiter. I think one of the biggest things, especially with respect to McClary, is Joe Harris-Simiak, the defensive coordinator, was one of his primary recruiters. And I think what you're seeing, Rutgers now has money that it didn't have in the previous iteration of Coach Schiano, didn't have in the Coach Ash era, where they're able to retain very good coordinators and assistant coaching staffs. And I think the consistency, the continuity, the fact that these coordinators could be in demand for other programs soon because they are that good at their job, I think there's a lot of stability and a lot of good vibes around Rutgers. One thing I will finish with saying, this is mostly high school recruiting. I have noticed, and I was going to write an article about this and discuss this in a recap I'm going to do of the recruiting cycle on my channel. Rutgers is going about building its team in a very specific way. And what they're doing is they're dedicating their NIL, the bulk of it. Now, I don't know this for a fact with insider knowledge, but generally speaking, from the reporting I'm getting and from what I do know, they are donating and dedicating a lot of their NIL to retention. And so they are, when Schiano says we are a developmental program, he doesn't mean the program's in perpetual purgatory as, a feeder. What he means is we are getting high school guys and younger guys. We are putting them in a pipeline, and we expect to have them here in a few years when they reach their potential. Now, Schiano's always been a developmental coach. This era makes it harder to do because the transfer portal is what it is. I think he's making a concerted effort to really bring in younger players that he sees potential in culturally, attitude-wise, and physical tools that he can develop. And by dedicating the NIL to retention and fostering a good culture, I think some of these young players really still see a place where they can go, grow up, reach their full potential, maybe get to the league, if not, really come out with a degree and good opportunities. And I think there is still something to be said for that recruiting ability at the high school level that maybe some other programs aren't dedicating as much to with the transfer portal, and expecting some kids who maybe aren't going to develop as fast to maybe leave. I think Rutgers is saying, well, if you're not going to do that, we're going to fill that void. And I don't know if these are high-end kids, but I think there's something to be said for really sticking to his guns about going after kids that want to be here, that he wants, and maybe it's starting to pay dividends.
Well, and it sounds like what you're describing is how do we make Rutgers not just a place to be, but the place to be? Like, we're going to become the place to be developed, to be a 4 or 5 year player here, get you ready for the NFL. And in this day and age, you need a culture. I think a lot of people, they think of college football and they think of the NCAA football game, which we're just about to get the new iteration of. And they're like, well, just get all the 5 stars. and
Right.
then that's just how you win. And it's like, no. And I think actually the biggest blueprint of this is Michigan. I was just talking with Andy and Jared over from Out of the Blue.
Mm-hmm.
They're part of the Amazing Brew network there.
Mm-hmm.
But they were talking about, they have done something that nobody else has done, which is they scout the portal and they recruit the portal, the right guys from the portal, better than anybody else.
Yes.
And that's how they made their success the past 3 years, is that they really hit the portal and then they got their guys in high school recruiting. And it sounds like what you're saying is really in the same vein. Rutgers has found their niche, which is, we may not get the blue chip guys, but the ones we get, we're going to keep, we're going to develop, and they're going to be darn good football players, and they're going to build a heck of a roster out of it.
Yeah, and I think like there's no, just what you said, your niche. Like there's no one way to build a team, but you better pick a way that you believe in and be really darn good at it. And I think Rutgers has said we're going to go after these high school kids, we're going to develop them, and some of their classes have been guys that were maybe a little more under the radar or not as much buzz in the last couple of years that have developed into really nice players and have stayed. And so these kids this year who are higher rated recruits are seeing, hey, they develop guys who maybe didn't have as much what the analysts thought was promise when they came in. I have on paper all of that promise. So imagine what they're going to do with me, and look at the team already competing. Now, if I go play for them, competing is a lot too. You can sell vision all you want. You got to put on the field. Rutgers put on the field last year. It's paying dividends in the recruiting cycle this year. That can't be, overlooked either. You combine all those things, and these guys with a lot of potential say, I can develop even more. And if all of us join hands, look what we can do. Rutgers, this is what's interesting to me too, Zach, is I think it's interesting. Rutgers had gone a little bit out of New Jersey the last couple of years. They'd gone more national than they'd really ever been in recent memory. And now a lot of these guys are Jersey guys.
Yep.
And I think it also, hey, they're going to go wherever they want to get the best players. And I think it just, I don't know. Perception is everything. I think it changes the perception. Not chasing everybody around. They're a destination. If you don't want to come, they'll go to Georgia. They'll go to the Midwest. They'll go out to Maryland, and they'll get guys. And this is a class with diverse geography, but a lot of Jersey kids, so it's an interesting thing.
Well, and I'll close this part of the conversation with this. We talked about DJ McCray. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, there is some stuff there, but for Rutgers to get recruiting wins over programs like Penn State, it doesn't matter the narrative. What matters is they beat Penn State out for a recruit. And they've beat like a lot, even there's some of their 3-star guys, they're not beating out Troy and Vanderbilt for some of these guys. They're beating out big time programs for some of these guys. Now, they may have been developmental prospects for some of these bigger programs, but the fact remains, part of what Rutgers has had to do is to really elevate not just their football team, but their brand. And all of a sudden they're doing that. So it sounded like you were about to respond to that.
Yeah. So I think, people can say whatever they'd like about who cares who we were up against, who cares about star chasing. And to some extent, that's true. You're going to find the best players for your program. We get it. But I've always thought, exactly to your point, you can gauge a lot about where the program currently is standing, especially in the eyes of recruits, with who you're going up against for recruits. And it was clear when we were regressing as a program at the last, years of Chris Ash, where the teams that were beating us were like, sometimes we get beat by Temple, and now we're flipping exactly what you said. Yeah, there's a narrative. Yeah, there's a reason that we got an individual to flip from Penn State, but it doesn't matter. We flipped somebody from Penn State. And usually a couple years ago, maybe, even if there was a reason for a kid to want to not go to Penn State any longer, he's not flipping to us. He's flipping to some other school. So the fact that we were able to flip a Penn State kid in general for perception, but also for the reality of people like you and I looking at the ascension of a program, it is a signifier of the growth of the program. I definitely think.
Yeah. We're talking about, the new blood that's coming in. But Last season was an incredible success. 7-6 with the gauntlet that they had, and I think we could even say if they don't have the schedule they had a year ago, we're
Mhm.
probably talking more than 7 wins. How do they top it? Like, who are the key returners that can make this even better season this year?
Well, I think you start with your big tackle Holland Pierce. He's somebody again who developed a big guy from the Trenton area, was kind of out of shape when he first showed up, and now he might be a potential draft pick. Getting him back and a bunch of the individuals on the offensive line is big for the program, because that's one of the biggest things we've struggled with since we've gotten into the Big Ten. They had a pretty darn good showing last year, and Kyle Monungai, the one of the leading rushers in the Big Ten, who put the team on his back again against Miami, like I predicted he would, and in several other games. Just an absolute beast of a determined, persistent, resilient runner who gets stronger as the game goes on. That's somebody who had really high stock at the end of last year, could have cashed it in and decided to go pro last year. But, again, stuck to what he, came here to do. He was the younger, not younger in reality, but like the little guy compared to Jalen Berger coming out of high school, but he's turned out to
Yeah.
be, and that's the Rutgers way. I mean, he came and developed. He's coming back. You got Sam Brown behind him, who flashed a heck of a lot the year before, but then had a foot injury. He's the backup, like the 1B running back.
Yeah.
And then you got Athan Kaliakmanis not coming back, but a guy with Big Ten experience who's coming in. The defensive side of the ball, Robert Longerbeam. I thought, honestly, I understand Melton went pro. Melton was our best punt blocker, which Rutgers is obviously known for, so that hurts. But I think Longerbeam was the best corner on the team last year. He's coming back.
Yeah.
I really think when you look at raw coverage, and sometimes with corners, you love the interceptions, obviously. You love the passes defended. You love the big hits. But sometimes if a corner is not being called at all, he might be blanking in his guy, and the guy's not getting anything thrown his way. And Longerbeam, a lot of times when there was trouble downfield, Longerbeam wasn't involved because his guy was covered. I thought he was the best corner on the team last year. He's coming back. Shaquan Loyal, a safety who's been starting for a while, single-handedly pretty much won the Temple game for us 2 years ago on a pick six. He's coming back, solidifies that back end. You obviously have Lewis. You have, I think, the defensive line. They kind of had a year that I don't think they were completely satisfied with last year. They were solid, but the numbers weren't there in terms of pressure, sacks. I think those guys have a chip on their shoulder. They're coming back to play. And when you look at the linebacking core, and Rutgers has an interesting defense these days, with these like kind of slash safety linebackers and kind of end linebackers, and they kind of vary it up. And you got guys like Torrey coming back, Tyreen Powell coming off some injuries, but before he went down last year, very talented sideline to sideline player, can go after the ball, just sheer athleticism, very gifted young man. You have Moses Walker, who was a highly touted recruit, another person they beat out Penn State for coming out of Brooklyn. And he hasn't even seen the field really yet. He had some injuries, and he's coming in as like tier, the backup, maybe off the bench type guy, or maybe starting to work his way into a lot more playing time as a younger guy. So you have a lot, what I talked about with that pipeline, you have guys coming back, because had they left right when their stock was its highest, now you lost that base that you had developed, and now the guys have to step up maybe earlier than you'd like. But now, since the vast majority of contributors last year stayed, you now have the guys not only who were already at the front of the pipeline, but were already there. Now they're here for a second year with even more maturity, more experience, tasted winning a little bit. Plus the guys who are almost in a pinch, could be the starters, are now kind of working in gradually. You got a strong and a deeper team.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's amazing as I look at the depth chart that Phil Steele put out. Aside from Kaliakmanis and Kenny Fletcher at tight end, every presumed starter, is either a junior or a senior.
Yes.
And that, like, And that's true on both offense and defense. Special teams is different. Punter
Of
is a
course.
freshman, Jai Patel at kicker is a
Mhm.
sophomore. But like when you have a senior laden team like this, and I think the other thing that's interesting, there are guys that I expected you to say that you didn't, which I think just goes to show there's a lot of return, like Flip Dixon, Christian
Yes.
Christian Dremel. Um, like I still, you were talking about the throws that Wimsatt missed a year ago. Dremel had a touchdown against Ohio State. If that
Yes.
ball is thrown, I mean, he beat a really good corner because Ohio State has really good corners right now.
Yes.
Um, might have been Igbinosin, I forget which one, but
Mhm.
toasted him on the
Mhm.
outside. And he's a good receiver. So you guys have a lot of talent coming back.
Yeah, and you
Um,
talk about Dremel and you talk about Flip Dix. I mean, those are big names that are known around the Big Ten, and I didn't even say them because I'm delving deep into it. That shows how deep. I mean, the whole team's basically coming back.
yep. Yeah. And which then begs the question, so you have all these starters coming back, but there's also a lot of key newcomers coming. Obviously Kaliakmanis, but who are some of the other newcomers that maybe takes this team to the next level?
Well, you talked about Dremel, and I think at the wide receiver position, you have Dymere Miller coming from Monmouth, who was the leader down at that league, a step down, and he's been impressive from what I understand in spring ball. He's going to add a level of electricity to the wide receiver core. Nyseem Brantley, who showed out in the spring game, um, he was couldn't play all year last year because of eligibility problems. He's
Hmm.
now been confirmed to be able to play. It's almost like getting a whole new guy in that wide receiver core who
Huh.
already had somebody like Chris Long coming back from injury, already had Dremel there, already had some developmental guys like Ian Strong, who was looking good as a freshman, who's going to take the next step up. But now you add these guys who are proven wideouts and proven commodities in college football coming in. That's another reason why I think you needed that quarterback who could execute at that level, because now you're bringing in guys that elevates the offense. You're talking about an offense that was primarily running the ball, whether it was the quarterback, whether it was Kyle Monangai, they were primarily relying on running. Now they're going to still primarily rely on running, but it's a lot better to rely on running when you have these electric weapons on the perimeter and in the slot and a quarterback who could hit them at opportune times, inopportune times from the defense because they're concentrating on stacking the box or whatever they're going to do. You got an OC like Kirk Shiraka who knows how to exploit these things with a quarterback he trusts who he's worked well with before. I think these wideouts are a huge addition to the team. I probably think they might be the biggest addition because I thought they were pretty talented last year. We had guys open, we just couldn't get on the ball. Now you're going to elevate that significantly. And obviously, when I talk about the wideouts, you got to talk about Kaliakmanis. It's a definitive upgrade over what they were last year in the passing game. You can do whatever you want with the running game. I understand that, Gavin Wimsatt, and I think there will be a noticeable drop off from the quarterback position in the running game. It was built in, it was designed. I think it worked very well in certain games, especially notably Indiana. I mean, it was pretty much sealed the game, like an 80-yard run he had. But the passing game is going to take, leaps and bounds improvement. And the running game, when you have guys like Monangai and an offensive line that I think is going to be pretty promising, I don't
Mhm.
think the run game as overall is going to take a big step back. So I think that's going to elevate the team quite a bit with a defense that's already solid with so many returning players. I think that gives us another dimension. It's going to be dangerous.
Yeah. I was just going to ask real quick, just going back to Nassim Brantley for a minute. Is he like a 26-year-old receiver
I think
coming
he's
out
an
of
older player. Yes.
Sacred
Yes.
Heart for 4 years and then Western Illinois and then didn't play a
Yes.
year ago?
Yes. So he's one of those older guys I think he's going to do well. He's got that eligibility. I don't know what went into the final ruling on the eligibility, what the issue was last year, but he's got that year of eligibility and he's that kind of player, experienced, older guy, and he looked good so far. I think it's going to add a lot to Rutgers.
Yeah. It's crazy to think, and I'm sure the COVID year had something to do with it too, but
It did. Yeah.
they've got, yeah, I mean, they have a really solid crew of playmakers. I
Mm-hmm.
think Kyle Monangai, we were talking about this over the Big Ten huddle a couple weeks ago. Monangai is my dark horse for the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year.
Oh yeah.
Like I
Oh, yeah.
think, and a couple of the guys were like, well, Rutgers has to contend, but my argument was if Rutgers gets to 9 or 10 wins and Monangai is the engine that gets them there, that's a really compelling argument, especially if there's like, I think aside from, the quarterback, it's escaping my name, the quarterback at Oregon, Dylan Gabriel.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think he's the front runner, and Donovan Edwards at Michigan.
Right.
But there's not really any other like proven commodities offensively.
Right.
That like there are some that have had good years. Like I think of the running backs at Penn State. I think of, obviously Emeka Ibuka and Travion Henderson at Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you could make a very compelling case, especially if Rutgers has a great year. Monangai goes crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's a dark horse to win that award.
I think it's possible. And I think, when you're a guy at Rutgers, you have to first kind of put your reputation out there, the year before to get the name out there. Now he's a known commodity. Now some of the people are watching him. They know who he is. If Rutgers does wind up with that many wins, which I think is feasible, and he's the engine, I definitely think he could be a dark horse 100% because of what he did last year and his name being out there and him being, an upperclassman, probably getting ready to go to the league. I could see it. It's a possibility for sure.
Oh, I threw it out there, 9, possibly 10 wins. The schedule is certainly not as daunting as a year ago, and I think it might lend itself to that. But it's not a cakewalk either.
No.
Right? Like Virginia Tech, I think is, very sneakily becoming a better program under Brent Pry, and they have to go Tulane Stadium. That it's a top 15 atmosphere in college football, if not top 10.
Mm-hmm.
At Nebraska, again, like Nebraska's they're not a top 10 team, but they're going to be formidable this year, and you have to go to Nebraska. And USC, like I don't know what to expect from USC, except I do think the defense is going to be better under Danton Lynn. So like not a cakewalk schedule, but certainly not like there's no Ohio State, there's no Penn State, no Michigan, no Oregon, no Iowa. Like it's not a difficult schedule either. Kind of talk us through it. Like, where do you see Rutgers being able to get to 9 and 10 wins, and can they get some of these key upsets on the road?
They can definitely get to 9 wins. Can they feasibly get to 10 wins? Yeah. Will they? Remains to be seen. I think with expectations, the way the schedule is this year, the fact that it's one of the more favorable schedules they've had, probably the most favorable schedule they've had since they joined the Big Ten, and that isn't because anybody's a slouch. That's just because you take some of these behemoths off the schedule and you run into some other teams, maybe in a rebuilding year or a year where they're taking a step back. And Rutgers is on an upward trajectory with all these mature players. Now, there's a difference, obviously, between meeting, projecting them to do this and actually going out and doing it. I think one of the things that Rutgers is going to have to do this year is last year, the expectation, I would say, and some people were downplaying them in the Rutgers community that they didn't expect a 500 season. I expected a 500 season based on the makeup of the team, the number of years Schiano had been there, the number of years they'd been building, the progress up to that point, the way the schedule broke. I predicted a 6-6 season, a 500 season. They could have stolen 1 or 2 last year, and it would have been unexpected, and it would have been great. Now, this year, the pressure's on because the expectation is for a winning season. Now, maybe not 9 or 10 wins. They'd have to steal some, but they're going to have to meet expectations, which is at least 8 wins, I think. And they are fully capable, based on just the way they are and the way the schedule shakes out, of you can call it overachieving. I mean, you and I might think that it's maybe achieving where they should or could be, but 9 or 10 wins is possible. It's time for Rutgers, if they ever want to get to that breakthrough point like they had in 2006, totally different world and universe of college football then.
Right.
But if they want to break through in this current universe and galaxy of football, this is the type of season where you need to do it, and you don't just do it by only beating the teams you're supposed to beat. You've got to steal a couple of those road wins, and Rutgers hasn't been able to do that really up to this point. They've met expectations last year. They got to take that next step. Virginia Tech is a top football atmosphere. They're improving. But like I said about Miami, and this isn't Miami, but they're an ACC team. You're a Big Ten team. Okay? They're good, but you should be improving. It's early in the season. It's on the road. It's challenging. It's not going to be you line up and you beat them and it's easy. It's going to be maybe a nail biter. Maybe they take the lead, early on. I don't know. But you're going to have to find a way to pull games like that out if you want to not only meet expectations, but beat expectations. You got games like the USC game. You're going out west. And, those type of games, and I understand Washington's coming here, and I understand they've lost some guys, and you don't count your eggs in those situations before they hatch. So there's some games in there that are going to be challenging to say the least. Mm-hmm. So if you want to meet that threshold, you're going to have to win games like the one against Virginia Tech. You want to take that next step, you're going to Nebraska. You've got to, have a good show. You've got to sneak out some of those games that they haven't been able to in the past. I mean, there was I remember last year, Iowa. Oh, Iowa's got this historically bad offense. It's so pathetic, even though their defense is great. The fact was that we went out there and they handily beat us. Like those perennial powers on the road have been a thorn in our side, no matter how well we're playing or how rough it is on them. And we've got to take that step. I think it's very feasible, but they're going to have to go out there. And some of these games are going to be tough. Virginia Tech, going to Nebraska. I understand where USC is, but going to USC across the coast, now you remember, you have UCLA coming to us. You have Washington coming to us. I think that cross-continental travel is going to hurt whoever's on the road in some of these Big Ten games this year. So that's a good advantage for Rutgers. Even if you drop the one on the West Coast, maybe pull out the one here against Washington, even though they're Washington. They've got to – I think they can, and I'm very excited. But I'm excited because I know I'm confident they're going to hit that 8 wins, and I know there's a possibility for more. And I'm waiting to see how they gel when the season starts.
Yeah, it almost seems like that 6-game stretch: Virginia Tech, Washington, Nebraska, Wisconsin, UCLA, USC is really what's going to make or break the season for the Scarlet Knights. Ironically, there's bye week before and after. Like they have 2 bye weeks this season.
Yes.
And that, I think one of the things that kind of unraveled Rutgers at the end of last season, there's no rest, and they were front loaded in terms of, or back loaded in terms of the difficulty of their schedule. And so, I mean, they were 6-2, and then it was just, I think it was Ohio State, Iowa. I mean, it was murderer's row at that point. And I think they got to the Maryland game and they were just spent.
And that's something too, Maryland, when we first came in, it was a back and forth thing. They've had our number, and I know Tagovailoa was there, but they've had our number. And so I think you're right that they were spent at the end of the year, but even things like that, no more getting clobbered by Maryland. Even if you play them straight out. Now it's at home this year. You've got to pull those out. But I agree with you. Last year, and fans are interesting because I have obviously a fan cap, but somewhat of a journalist cap. And I had predicted the season 6-6 with the exact wins and the exact losses. So I said on my prediction, look, we might win a bowl game and it'll be a great season and a success, but you're going to strap in for the last month and we're going to lose every single game because of the way it's stacked up. Yep. And I think for perception, but also for what you're saying, you build up a lot of confidence and you build up a lot of momentum, and then to get smacked a couple weeks in a row, and you get Ohio State, but then you get a team in Iowa maybe you think you can beat because you've been playing good, their offense has been struggling, and then you lose decisively again. And I think it starts to wear and grind you down. Hopefully this year with the 2 bye weeks and manageable games, every week is a new opportunity this year, and that's really true. Even if you have a misstep or you lose, you have a chance next week. Even if you're not favored, you have a fighting chance. It might bode better for them.
Yeah. Well, and it makes, to me, as I look at the schedule, like I think Virginia Tech, Nebraska, and USC are the most difficult games. Mm-hmm. But what do they do in the in-between with Washington, Wisconsin, and UCLA? Like that Wisconsin game in particular is very intriguing to me because I think, and I think it was even a year ago, as last year, I
Yeah.
was like, I think Rutgers is going to beat Wisconsin, and
Yes. Yeah.
Wisconsin, I don't think it was closer in the score, but I don't think it was
Well, what
as close. Speak on that a
it
little
was on
bit.
the road too, but what happened was I believe Gavin Wimsatt went out and for one drive, and Evan Simon came in, threw a touchdown pass. Gavin Wimsatt was playing okay, and the team was kind of going back and forth until I think late in the first half. Gavin threw a pick six,
Mm,
and when Wisconsin kind of got that pick six, momentum completely changed, and Rutgers just kind of got into that Wisconsin versus Rutgers thing where they're lining up and just getting hit in the mouth after that, and they couldn't recover. But I think for most of the first half, might have even been the third quarter. I was actually like working a volunteer event during that game, so I was checking the score. So it's not like my most vivid of memories, but I'm confident what I'm saying. Like it was close for some duration of the game, whether it was just the first half or up to the third quarter. We threw the pick six, or we started to come back. It was close, and we were on the verge of taking the lead or tying, and he threw the pick six. Something
yeah.
like that, where it was close. Like it was a tit for tat until a couple missteps by Rutgers, made it a comfortable victory for Wisconsin. I agree with you. Again, Wisconsin this year is not the Wisconsin they've played 3 years ago, 4 years. I mean,
Yep.
you got to line up. You got to beat them. You got to get the monkey off your back with some of these programs. You got to beat some perennial Big Ten names. You got to do it.
Yep. Yep. And I think I'm with you. I think this is we were joking about this a little bit on the Big Ten huddle. There is this outside shot that the TV execs are going to hate the Big Ten because if you look at Rutgers' schedule, you look at Iowa's schedule, both teams are primed to make a run at the Big Ten championship game.
It's crazy.
And, everybody's thinking Ohio State, Oregon, or Michigan, Penn State, or Michigan, Oregon, something like that. But they all have to play each other.
Yes.
Iowa plays Ohio State, and that's
Mhm.
it. Rutgers plays USC. There's a real, and people might think we're nuts, but there is a real possibility that Rutgers is a dark horse to be in the Big Ten championship game.
I think it speaks to now getting rid of the divisions and the way that these schedules are going to be every year with the variability of the opponents. I think it's cool, and I don't think we're far-fetched at all because you have to look at the schedule. You have to see how it's going to shake out. And I think going forward with this interesting mix of teams in the Big Ten and the size of it and the way it's going to be scheduled, I think you're going to have more opportunities for this year in and year out. And TV execs may hate us, but I think it kind of makes it fun, I mean,
Yes.
and you
Yeah.
give teams a chance. Iowa's been there so many times from the West, but teams like Rutgers or whoever has a chance in the used to be in the East that now is not playing that gauntlet. I just think it's going to make it even more interesting because of the variability in the schedule. And this year is probably one of the best examples of that we have in the next few years. And if something like that were to happen, TV execs will hate us, but they love us for all these other primetime games they're getting and all these cities they get with us now. LA, New
Absolutely.
York, so they'll get theirs during the season with all their streams and their Thursday nights and their Friday and all this stuff. They'll have to live with it. If it's Rutgers, Iowa, I'll love it, obviously.
It'll be great. It'd be
Yeah, going
great.
to Indianapolis and hang out and
Indianapolis is I've been to 2 Big Ten championship games, and the food scene in Indy is phenomenal.
I
It's
keep
it's so
hearing
good.
this, and that's what I was just gonna say. Like the St. Elmo's, cocktail sauce, whatever I keep hearing
Yeah.
about. I have to get there. And my mother went there for a Super Bowl for the Giants, and
Oh
she loved it
man,
too. So like I
it's
have
great.
to get to Indy. That would be the best reason to go. Rutgers getting into the Big Ten championship. So
Yeah,
I hope you're right.
it's a great environment.
Mhm.
Speaking of food, we're going to wrap up with this question. Rutgers is going to be a hot ticket this year.
Mhm.
If we're going to go to a game, where should we go to grab some grub, and what should we get? Like, what is like the cuisine of New Jersey in your opinion?
So there's a lot of cuisine in New Jersey, but I would say this if you're coming to a Rutgers game because so technically both the football stadium and the basketball arena are in a town called Piscataway, which is like a little suburb outside of New Brunswick, whereas the main Rutgers campus is in New Brunswick. New Brunswick's like a small city. You got to go to New Brunswick, and there's 2 places that I'm going to recommend to you. First one is Destination Dogs. It's a hot dog place, but what it is the menu is in the theme of a passport, and it's Destination Dogs because it's different style hot dogs from all around the country, and they're really gourmet. Like the bun is a pickle, some have a pickle on the hot dog, fried on, all these different variations of hot dogs, and they're really high quality, really good. And there's like 3 or 4 of them at least that are New Jersey themed. There's a Newark hot dog, a Jersey Shore hot dog, awesome beer too, awesome atmosphere, awesome place. But if you really want to get into the nitty gritty of like a uniquely New Jersey experience, you're going to go to this place called Stuff Your Face, and it's spelled Stuff Y-E-R face. Stuff Your Face. It's got a bar area, an outside bar area, and what it is Strombolis, and they call them bolies. But you're gonna go and you're gonna make your own. There's a whole list of ingredients, like different cheeses, different sauces, different meats. You're gonna make like some kind of stromboli. Put pepperoni, sausage, salami, tomato sauce, mozzarella. Do all that. And it's because you get strombolis of all different types all over this country, and some of them are soggy, some of them are hard to keep together. No, these are like perfectly wrapped, such good quality like dough and bread that it's not going to fall apart. It goes down so easy. It's so fresh. It tastes so good. And it's a bar where a lot of like there's TVs with games on. There's places to sit. There's places to go to the bar. There's students in there. So the atmosphere is cool. It's like a bar atmosphere, but you get this really awesome stromboli. Make your own. Stuff Your Face. It's one of a kind. It's an institution in New Brunswick since the 70s. It's a must go. It's right like in the area where there's a lot of students and things. It's very down home New Brunswick. You got to visit. Those are my 2 recommendations.
I am so glad that you picked something with Italian like feel, because I feel like I grew up in New Jersey for like I went, from 3 months old to end of high school into college. I was in New Jersey, and I did not realize how spoiled I was with Italian food until I moved to Pennsylvania.
Yes, you don't realize till you leave.
I learned how to make my own pizza because there's some redeemable Italian food.
I like how you say that, redeemable.
Yeah, yes. There's redeemable Italian, but New Jersey, everybody talks about the New York slice, but New Jersey really, there's a great Italian restaurant on almost every corner.
Yes.
In New Jersey. And yes. I have not been to Stuff Your Face, but I feel compelled to now.
You'd love it. You got to go. Yeah. Yes. And also, hey, you're in there for the football games. Come to the tailgates, man. Like my tailgate, anybody's welcome. Reach out to me. It's a big public tailgate. You just give a fee or whatever. And we have really interesting menus every time. The tailgate scene is better than I think a lot of people realize at Rutgers, and it's a lot of fun. So, but make sure you report back if you go to Stuff Your Face. I want to hear your thoughts.
Will do. Well, you just talked about contacting you. How do we get in touch with you? How do we follow you? How do we stay in touch with your podcast and with everything you're doing?
Night Watch, Night Watch spelled like a night, KNIGHT watch on YouTube. If you want to find it, there's other what's the word? Like the people that, play knights or whatever. So don't go for that. Type Night Watch Larry K. Night Watch Larry K. Just type it in Google or type it in YouTube search. Night Watch Larry K. Find me on there. Click subscribe. I've got even little excerpts about food and whatnot. Send me a message. Write me a comment on Instagram. I'm Larry_AK. You can find me there and follow me there. On Twitter, just type in Larry Krayn, Krayn, but type in Larry K Night Watch on Twitter. I should come up. And I'm following the College Huddle and all that. Send me a message if you want to get together at the tailgate or whatever else. Follow me. I'd love to talk to anybody interested in Big Ten sports in general. The community has been awesome, and I think we can all learn something from each other. So I welcome followers from all teams, and I love to talk Big Ten sports in general.
Great. Yeah, and guys, seriously, make sure you hit up Larry. Larry, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, sir. It's great to be with you.
It's so fun.
Yes.
And at some point, I don't know when, because I got 3 kids, and I mean we. At some point, I should bring my son. I brought my son to an Ohio State game last year, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I'd love to get him to different
Yeah.
venues in the Big Ten. So Rutgers is definitely one that I'd love to get to at some point. So I might join you at some point there.
Would love it.
So
Absolutely love it. Just let me know. Just
yeah,
let me know. And you got to come over on my show too. We'll talk Big Ten on the Night Watch show at some point too. We'll schedule it.
let's do it. Let's do it.
Sir.
Well, and for the rest of you listening in, again, make sure you follow Larry, like and subscribe here. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. God bless.